Welcome to another episode of Todd's Video Games and More. Today we are going to be talking about our journey with Carnival, a 1981 Sega Gremlin classic. Now, I'm not familiar with this game, or at least I wasn't when I bought it, but it turns out that this is a very popular game from back in the day and is well regarded by many collectors. So when I had the opportunity to pick one up, I decided to go for it. Now, it didn't look like it was going to be much of a challenge. But when I bought it, it had basically nothing. It had this and a control panel and the shell, and that was it. Now in this episode, we're going to do a little bit of everything. We're going to do some shopping. We've got to get a monitor. We have to get boards. We have to find all the parts to piece this back together. We have cabinet work to do. We have Bondo. We have painting. We have everything that you could possibly need to do with an arcade game in this one. And that's why this journey is so long. This is by far my longest video, and I'm going to break it up into two parts, a part one and a part two. Probably will leave one long epic one, so if you're watching that, good luck. We have several hours of showing everything you could possibly want to do with an arcade game restoration. So sit back and enjoy. All right, so this might make a good project for me. This is not Mr. Do, this is Carnival, which is a game from 1980 I know nothing about. As a matter of fact, I don't remember ever hearing about it, but apparently it's somewhat of a classic. What is Sega Carnival? Not to be confused with Carnival, an on-rails shooter released by Midway in 1998.
Oh, she's actually pretty scary.
Sega Carnival is much tamer by comparison. Gameplay replicates the feel of a carnival shooting gallery, much like this one. In this sneaky ad for the Army. You may have also seen elaborate shooting galleries with all sorts of mechanical targets. In Sega Carnival, the goal of the game is to hit moving targets and pipes with a limited supply of ammo. You can't shoot through the pipes box. Pesky ducks randomly fly down and steal your bullets. There's also a box that can help or hurt. You only get more bullets by hitting certain targets. You must hit all the targets to complete the level. Then comes the first bonus level in arcade history. Shoot the bear! Then on to the next level until your bullets finally run out. I'm a huge Sega fan and have several Sega arcade games, as well as a large collection of Sega console games. But I have no recollection of Sega Carnival. Either the arcade or console versions, like this one on the Atari 2600. So I am definitely intrigued. And this cabinet has good structure. It doesn't look so great from an aesthetic standpoint. And from the description here by the seller, it has the control panel, the marquee, and that's it. So there's no circuit boards inside, there's no monitor. He says there are other things inside, but I don't know if they go with Carnival or Mr. Do. So he's got it listed at $275. I'm going to keep in touch with him, see what we can deal with on this, and maybe go on a road trip. This truck's been on a lot of adventures over the years, and now its coolant tank is leaking everywhere, so I'm going to have to put in a new coolant tank before we hit the road. It's a very brisk and chilly late March morning, and Cindy is already inside. We've got everything packed up in the truck. We are about to head to a double pickup. We're going to Kankakee, Illinois to pick up a Game Boy cabinet, and then we are heading to Michigan to pick up an arcade game.
Race day for these two.
It's so cool.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Good job.
You too, thanks. Burger King. There it is. Hello.
Kiosk here.
Yeah.
And then another corner and displays that I enjoy a lot and I take pride in is all the retrofit cabinets.
1%. So here it is. I'll be careful. The door is about to go. So that's what we're looking at.
Needs a little love.
Needs a little love. All right, we got it loaded up. So we got under the blanket. We've got Game Boy, kiosk of sorts, and the cabinet back here. So we are ready to roll.
Hold it straight in front of your face, looking at this knuckle, and then through this knuckle to the red. So don't hold it down like that. Hold it up just like this. Bring it straight over your head like this. No samurai action. It never works. All right, straight over your head like you're scratching your back. Throw and release right in front of your face. So. Just like that.
Nice.
Now are you worried?
This way.
Yep. Just like that.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Here it is.
All right, so here it is. That's it for sure.
There we go. Look over it. Oh.
Packed up, ready to go back to Indiana.
Let's go.
All right, so we got it loaded up. We're on the way back. We have a 5.5 hour drive remaining to get back home. And we've got the tarp on, all safe and sound. Hopefully no rain. We'll be good. When we think of Sega, we typically think of the Sega Genesis, a console that competed with Nintendo in the 1990s, with hits like Sonic the Hedgehog, Toe Jam and Earl, and Echo the Dolphin. But Sega started as an American company in the 1940s, placing jukeboxes and slot machines in military installations in the Pacific. In fact, Sega stands for Service Games. Sega changed ownership several times before moving into the Japanese market, and successfully navigated the arcade boom of the late 1970s, purchasing Gremlin, producer of microprocessor-based games, leading to hit releases like Turbo, Frogger, and Zaxxon, and hopefully Carnival. Carnival is in the garage. Here's what we're dealing with. So we've got lots of cabinet issues, but overall it's pretty structurally sound. Just a whole lot of the particle board wearing down, the paint coming off. On this side, you can see where they have painted over the old sticker that was up here, the side art, painted all the way to the bottom with some white paint that's really textured, so it looks a little unusual. And then put the Mr. Do sticker over the side. And then if we look at the top, a lot more of that bad particle board, a lot of chipping, a lot of worn areas. Here we can see the original sticker on the back, which I'd like to recreate or save. And this is game number 26987 on the serial number. So they apparently made a lot of cabinets. Here's what we have on the other side. It's about the same as the opposite side. You can see here though, some of the original art coming through from the Carnival and a little more of a lost sticker up here. And then if we go back to the front to the control panel, this is one that he bought to add on. It's pretty worn and we'll have to replace that control panel overlay. We've got nothing inside of there. We can't see it very well yet because of the reflection. And then down here we have the coin doors that are taped shut. We've got some spliced up wiring here and there. We've got a coin counter flopping around. We've got some harnesses that don't connect to anything yet. Some rust, my favorite. But we can fix this. Let's see if I can get this control panel off. Oh, okay. Ooh. Yikes. That's rusty. Okay. Now we can see there's the monitor mount and the bezel looking out. And what we got inside, which is not a whole lot. Transformer, some stickers, some sort of harness, electrical box. That's about it. There we go. Here's a little better view. And we're missing a lot. There should be a power supply in here. This is just a transformer, and this is just basically a little line filter and connection box. This is just the power cord. We do have some harness pieces, so that's something. We've got lots of cut wires all over. Yeah, this is a mess. And this wire harness, this edge connector, this is only for dig dug. We don't need anything like this. So someone has put this back in and just reran the wires everywhere it needed to go. So it's not using the original wiring for this part. I'm also always curious what I can find in the hidden recesses down there. And I can see a wrapper, I can see a quarter, and I can see some sort of metal cover plate. I don't know how to get in there yet to get that stuff out. Here's something else I don't understand. I'm looking from the inside up to the marquee in the front, and you can see we have a speaker and we have a speaker wire, and you can see all the way up there our marquee, which you can see scratch marks through looking at it from here. But there's no place for a light. I don't see a fluorescent light, and I don't think I've seen any games that don't light up, so that's another issue. The marquee also seems like extra set back. It looks like that's how it went on, but typically they're really close to the front of this and don't have this big edge. But maybe that's how this one was designed. So we just unloaded the game we went to Michigan to pick up, Carnival. Had it in the garage, checking Facebook and Marketplace, and another game popped up that I would like to have. So I messaged them and they said, come and get it. So we're back in the truck and we're heading about an hour away to Georgetown, Indiana to pick up Super Monaco GP. No more Mr. Do, Mr. Don't. Another cool product is this goof off graffiti remover. So I've used it before where someone's painted over original paint, and this will take off the new paint, newer paint, but not the original. And we have a vinyl sticker underneath a lot of this, so we're going to see if we can get to some of it just to see what it looks like. You can see how it's already started to eat up this paint and show through underneath. All right, this paint is being pretty stubborn. So now we're gonna go to the clean stripper that I know will take it off. Okay, it's been 20 minutes or so. Some of this paint's bubbling up great, like in through here. Anywhere that Mr. Do sticker had covered is coming off. It's fresher paint. It was covered. Up here, might be a little battle still. It is not really wanting to come off. So we will just have to keep working on it. I might as well peel some of this up and see what it looks like underneath. Well, even that stripper is struggling. So I think instead of trying to strip off enough to see the old side art, just to see what it looks like, I can see the old side art is bleeding anyway. It's going to lose its color while I do this. So I might as well get out the heat gun and just take that whole decal off. Well, no matter how much I try to do this in a really cool way, I can't get the side art off without tearing into the vinyl laminate that's on the wood itself. And that's starting to come off. And to be honest, I've got to go all the way back to that anyway to rebuild and come back. So I think instead of just trying to peel off one part at a time, I'm just going to get it all the way down to the bare wood. And that's a wrap. The good news is that underneath the cabinet looks really nice. Nice and solid. It's got a nice kind of glaze to it, so it's not just raw wood. So that's great. If we come to the other side, well, we still have the whole other side to do. But at least this time I won't mess around with chemicals and things like that. I'll just strip it all the way down right off the bat. The front of this is a little different. I think we can just repair this. I don't think we'll have to strip that off. Mr. Do. Thanks for the cleanup help.
You bet.
Now that the light's hitting this just right, you can actually see the bubbles in the particle board where it's got some moisture damage and some things bowing out. So definitely needed to strip everything off of it. See, there's more down here. And get down to the bare wood. And here's my new turn signal assembly. Check that out. Working lights. Now I want to take this plexiglass and little plastic bezel off because I'm going to get a new piece anyway because this one's a little trashed. And it's got these little bolts on each one. They've made this in such a way that they've stuck the bolts in a little spot that even with my long ratchet extensions, I can't get it in there. So I have to oil each one of these, and there are 5 of them, and get some needle nose pliers and just work them back a little at a time. All right, let's see if we can get this marquee off. This is a strange one because in most games you have a clip up here, you take it off, and you lift the marquee out. But on some, this entire board drops down and comes out that way, as far as I can tell. So there are 4 screws in here. Well, yep, 4. They don't look original, but I'm gonna pop them out, and we'll drop this thing down. Get that out. So here's what we have inside. We've got the speaker, and then you can see a little board back there that used to, I believe, hold a fluorescent fixture for the light bulb to light up all this. So we'll have to replace that. Now I've disconnected the speaker, so I should be able to pull this out. Just like that. I'd like to take this door off and everything in here and this frame so we can fix it up, but the wires are all soldered to the buttons and the coin counters over here. So I'm gonna have to do some desoldering to free these up. And I'm not even sure if these coin mechs are original, because while they look the same, there's a couple extra riveted pieces that go in that have connections here and there. But this one over on this side, if I can focus back in there, it does not have them. And it kind of looks like somebody just kind of bent these frames to make them fit, which is unusual to say the least. So I've got all the wires free except for this little tilt button, but we'll get it next. and then we can take the door off. Next, I'm going to disconnect this transformer and take it out of the cabinet. Now we do have a few surviving pieces. We have these, they go to the monitor. So that'll go in right up in there. And then we have this one that I'm not sure what it's for. It's heavy duty, so it looks like a power cord of some sort. Maybe came over here, came to the transformer or to a power supply. So we do have a couple of pieces left. And then this part is called a JAMA harness. And the JAMA harness was made as a group collaboration, Japanese Arcade Machine Manufacturer Association, I think, came up with this so that they could have a standardized connector for all games. So you could take a game out, put another game in. In fact, this had Mr. Do in it, and Mr. Do was one of the first conversion kits. So all you had to do was convert all the old wiring into a JAMA harness, and then from then on you could just switch games pretty easily. Well, we don't want the JAMA harness. We want all these on their original harnesses. So I'm going to have to cut all these off and make new connectors to go back to the boards. This Frogger was also made by Sega Gremlin and should contain the same power supply that we need for Carnival. Now I can take it from here because when I bought this it wasn't working and I added a modern switching power supply with an adapter for it. But I think the old one is still in there. So I'm going to try to get back in here somehow and rob it today. So this is the more modern switching power supply right here. And this is the power supply, and you can see I don't use it. There's some loose wires back here, things like that. But I do still use the transformer on it. And so now I got to figure out what I want to do. And it doesn't look quite the same as the pictures I've seen of the Carnival one. There's no big blue capacitors on this side. So it may not be exactly the same after all. If we look at the wiring diagram, we can see that there is a transformer that needs to be on the power supply. And there's also another transformer that goes directly to the monitor. So that's why I will need two. Now that also makes me wonder, am I missing another transformer for my Frogger monitor? Is it isolated like it's supposed to be? So that's something else I'm going to have to check out. We know we need the circuit boards that go inside for the Carnival game. And there are two sets of boards. There's a CPU board, which is basically the main processing board. And then there's an additional sound board with a little music board on top of it. Now here on eBay, I have found the circuit board. This one is what's called the Extended ROM Video Logic board. That's the first version of the Carnival board. Later, they made a more common board, which was called the Dual VIC. The Dual VIC is fine, but it has a custom chip on it that's hard to find. There's no replacements or reproductions for that chip. So if something's really wrong with that chip, then I might be out of luck. This version, though, is a little easier to repair. So this is the one that we're going to go for. And it says buy it now at $175. I've worked with this seller before, so I may just make an offer here to see what's fair. And I think $150 might do it. And now we've got the offer in, so we'll wait next 24 hours or so and see if we get it. And here we have the soundboard and the music board. Untested, probably not working, but $65, that's a pretty good fair price, and I'll go ahead and buy it. I got a lovely package of parts from Quarter Arcade. So I've got some wiring harness here for Carnival. New power cord. We have our power supply. I've pulled the little electrical box out of the Carnival cabinet, and I've got the power supply here. I've got the wiring diagram. First of all, I got to figure out where all this stuff is supposed to go, how we're going to connect the electricity to it, make sure it's working properly, then run it to the power supply, and then we'll start testing that. Plus, if we look at the diagram, the black, the hot comes in and goes right to this fuse, and then it's supposed to go from this fuse to this interlock switch, and then from this interlock switch back to the brown over here. So someone just decided they didn't want this switch anymore, so they were just going to cross these wires here. So we have to take these apart and make some new connectors to go from here to here and from there to here. Here you can see where they spliced in probably the original wiring to their new wiring, and basically just twisted it up and ran some electrical tape around it. We're gonna do it a little nicer than that. Well, let's see if we can redo this power block here and get this thing tested today. So I've got the tools I need. I've got a stripper, I've got a crimper, I've got some connectors, I've got a wire holder for doing some soldering. I think we are all set. Now the first thing I'm going to do is redo all these ragged edges here. So I'm just going to cut off the old on each of these. And then here, someone has added an additional wire and resoldered it to this part. I don't want to take all this apart because that might be a little tricky with the heat shrink and everything else. So we'll just hook right onto what they've left us. And that's fine. And I'm going to take our great wire strippers and restrip each one of these. All right, now I've got this kit of these spade connectors. There are a couple different sizes. There's a large and a medium. I guess there's 3 sizes, and a really little that I rarely use. But typically it's going to be either the medium or the large. And it comes with all these covers or sleeves that we can put over the top to insulate them. So I'm going to figure out which size we need for these buttons here and here, this switch, and we'll get it set. Now I have the right size spade connector loaded into my crimpers and ready to go. Then down here I have the brown wire that's going to be basically our hot going into the line filter. And then I need to take an insulating sleeve and put it on the wire before we crimp, because after is too late. And then I'm going to take the crimpers, I'm going to take this wire, and there's not a lot of room here to work. I'm going to slide it in like that, give it a squeeze, pop it out. Now we have our connector, and then I can slide the sleeve over the top of that once we put it on, and that will insulate it. And now we have that connected up. Now I've come to the point where I want to go ahead and bring the power cord in so that I can go ahead and get this soldered on before I hook something that's going to be in my way. Now we have these holes cut out. We have one here, we have 2 more, and these are kind of exit holes for the wiring. They've got these knockout grommets inside, and so this side's missing it though. And the reason you want it is you don't want to have wiring rubbing against metal and eventually cutting into the metal and shorting. So I went to Lowe's and I bought, this is exactly a 1/2 inch across, a 1/2 inch knockout bushing. Well, their idea of a 1/2 inch and my idea of 1/2 inch are completely different. This is even 3/4 of an inch on the inside, so I have no idea why they call it a 1/2 inch. But what I'm going to do for right now, because I'd like to get this moving, is I'm going to take one of these out and just move it to this side, and then I'm going to order something to go on this end. All right, so now I've got the wiring inside. Sometimes this will be knotted up or something on the inside to keep this from pulling back out. Kind of a strain relief, they would call it. In this case, in the cabinet, there's a strain relief holding the cord right before it goes in, so we don't have to worry about that so much. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and solder on the black to here, the hot, and then we will run these other two to the other two, the blue and the green. And what I've done is I've pushed the wire through the hole, wrapped it back over itself. Now I've got some solder and my soldering iron, and we're just going to heat this up and we're going to set it up. And I know before I used my handy dandy wire strippers, my tool, but where we're going to be soldering two wires together, I want just a little more length on these. So I'm just going to use my strippers and give ourselves a little more to grip. So there's that one, just like that. Slam it right into the camera. And then we'll be able to hook these wires together, our inputs. And then before we solder the wires together, we want to have our heat shrink tubing ready to go. So I'm going to slide some over this wire, just like that. And then I'll get one for our white and blue. We'll solder these two together. You can add a little flux if you want for this to flow a little easier, but I've not really seen it make that much difference in something like this. It flows through these pretty easily the way it is. And I also have this little mini heat gun I can use instead of the big one for little things like this. I'm just going to turn it on, and then we'll shrink our tubing. Okay, now we have everything tucked in nice and neat. Everything's hooked up, ready to test these outputs. Now we'll do a little bit of a sanity check. I've got my continuity on. I'm hooked on to what's normally the hot or the line coming from the cord. And if we get to the fuse, we can come in, one side of the fuse, go out the other. So we know our fuse works. And then we can go to our switch in, switch out is nothing until I push it, and then it goes. And then we have our line filter here, so we know we're the hot side over here. And if we push the switch in, then we get continuity to there and not to the other one, which is good. And if we do the same on our neutral, coming in, the white comes in, goes all the way through. We really can't test it until here. But there it is, and not shorted. And then we have our ground. And the ground should be this entire case now, because this line filter should be grounded to the case. Yep. And nothing else, so no shorts. Well, hey there, little Todd. What do you think of the restoration so far? I think it's fantastic. I also find this kind of interesting. This was in our cabinet. This I bought online. Here's the ground strap from this, and here's the ground strap from this. It looks like they're torn from the same one, like the same thing. And why somebody would cut this or tear it, I don't know, because they just pull it off right like that. But it's funny that I have both pieces right here. Now we want to go from here to here. And we have a terminal here for the ground. This uses the bigger of my spades, the bigger size. And then we have one for each of the wires coming in, and it uses Looks like the standard size again down there, over there. Now, oddly with these, you can see where they use half of a double cord, like a lamp cord, for each one, which is strange. I don't know why they didn't just use one lamp cord and just split the two at the end to the two different terminals. Yet another mystery with this machine. Now it's wired up, even if maybe just a little temporarily with these two wires. I don't think it really matters which is black and white when you're going to a transformer like this. I don't think the polarity makes any difference. Usually I think you see two black wires coming off, but I'm going to keep them sorted just for our own ease of understanding the electronics. And we're going into this transformer here at steps 1 and 3, which is what it says to do for 110 volt, which is what we have. This is 100 volt for Japan, and this is a higher voltage for Europe. And what we're going to do is turn this on and just make sure it's not even hooked to this part of the power supply that's making the low voltage. Just make sure nothing explodes or smokes or anything like that, just to see if the transformer and whatever it's hooked up to are working. So I'm going to flip it on. And I don't hear anything or see anything, and I'm just going to take that as a good sign. Oh, and as is tradition on Todd's Video Games and More, I forgot there's a switch here we have to pull. So now we will turn it on for real. And I still don't hear anything or see anything, so that's good. So now I'm going to hook it up to the other board over there, and we can see if we can read any voltages. Now I have it hooked up, and it scared me to death when I put this on because it popped real loud because of the charge held in the capacitors. Even though everything was shut off, I know something was happening. So that's on. So these are the outputs, and I have a list of what we expect to see on the different pins. And confusingly, instead of being pin 1 over here and so on, they start with 11 and go to 20. But we can also tell normally our orange is going to be 12 volts. So that's right here at pin 12. In the middle we have a couple black, and black on a low voltage system is usually ground. So that's what it says, ground. Then we have a -5 volts, which is a blue, and then we have a couple red, which are normally on a board like this, the +5 volts. So I'm hooked to the ground with my multimeter, and we're on voltage. So I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to run the probe over here and see if we get anywhere near 5 volts, and we'll see. Or we might just have the whole thing catch on fire. So turn this on, and on we go. Okay. No weird noises. And right here we have 5.176 volts. Well, that is great. And then over here we have, if I can get down in here, 12.47. That's also great. And for -5 volts, -5.17. So this is working right out of the box. Awesome. Now you might ask yourself, what if it wasn't working? Well, we have all kinds of different parts on here. We'd have to start troubleshooting. There's a list here that we have for testing at different places on the board. But it looks like we lucked out. Hooray. No, your monitor or phone is not crooked. I'm using this particular dolly that I have. That's very handy for moving arcade games. And it's got a little drop down thing down here, so you can just set the game on it and then we can move it around wherever we want. You get at different angles. So the goal here is we want to start really cleaning out the inside of this. And there's a bunch of debris down in the bottom quarter down there, hard to see from this angle. We're trying to figure out how to get it out. So we're going to do that, then we're going to vacuum this thing out. Yay, we found a quarter, 1984. So here's the bottom of it. I highly doubt these little things are the original leg levelers. We got it. All right, what do we get here? It's like a piñata. We got quarters, 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 another quarter. Got some bolts, lots of lint, lots of fuzz. Got the warning sticker from the monitor tube. We got a piece that doesn't go with this game at all, I don't imagine. Green piece of cardboard.
Oh, and another corner.
And another quarter. Awesome. It's pretty filthy down in the front. We'll get it cleaned out too. Nice job, Cindy.
Yeah.
It looks much better. All right, it's back to Carnival today. And I've got some decisions to make on this top here. I thought I would just pop it off and cut a brand new one, but the more I look at it, the more I see it's actually pretty solid. So I may repair it. I like repairing the particle board. There is a little screw up here in the top that came through. I'm not sure exactly what it did, but I'm gonna go ahead and remove it right now. And then I'm gonna get out some wood hardener and I'm gonna put a coating of that on these back doors, the speaker panel, and all this particle board on the top and on the side. All right, so I have my Minwax wood hardener, which is not cheap. I think it's up to $17 a bottle. It doesn't go terribly far, but it is fantastic. It'll soak right into all this old particle board and it will solidify everything and give us a good surface to be able to sand down. So I'm gonna pour some here. And it is simple enough to use. I'm gonna use kind of a cheap old paintbrush here. But basically just paint it on and let it soak in. And you may have to use several layers of it if you find it's really, really soaking in and it's not getting things firm at the top. But you can see how that board is just absorbing all of that as it goes right on. Paint and all right on through it. So I'm going to paint all these boards, particularly the edges, which is where we want to have a nice finish at the end. And we'll get all these set. I've applied the wood hardener all around the edges, all the way around front and back, down along the bottom, on the sides, on the top. So we're gonna let all that set up and then we'll start working on sanding. Well, it's a good day to sand off the rest of this cabinet and get it primed and start working on some of the bad particle board on the inside. Right, Mr. Chipmunk? I'd like to keep this texture if I could. These holes are factory. That hole is not. These two holes are not. So I'll have to fill some of these in. We've got some bad edges down here, but not terrible. So we'll see how they look when we sand off. We'll have to do a little bit there. Down here though, we've got a little more broken off the bottom here. This will be some Bondo work. that's looking pretty good. It really looks good where I sanded in the front. That came up a lot better than what I thought and left the white with the grain in it. Found a few high spots here and there, got them sanded back down. The top, well, I sanded some of that off and I don't know, I'm still a little worried about it. Here we have our main circuit board. So as I'm looking over it, it's overall in pretty good shape on this side. I don't see anything too outrageous. If I flip it over to the other side, I can see some bad residue right through here, and it looks like where they did a repair, because on the other side we now have a socket in that position. And I can see a little corrosion right there. And maybe right in through there too. So we'll start by cleaning those areas up. I'll be using this Deoxit D5 to help clean this up. I use it for circuit boards all the time. And what's known as a fiberglass pin or fiberglass brush that we can use. It's got just enough to it to take things off of a board, but not enough to it to scratch things up. So I like to spray a little bit into just an empty bottle cap of some sort and dip it out from there. And then I've got some Q-tips and some things to clean up the mess. Okay, this side is cleaned up nicely, and the front side also looking pretty good. So I think I'm ready to hook this up and see if it works. Now I've got the board all laid out, but I'm not sure where the connectors go. And if I look at the wiring schematic, it's just generic. These aren't in any particular spots. But if I go to this one, then I can see this matches our board layout like this, but it's still not labeled. It's kind of labeled, but the rest of this isn't in the manual I have. And then I've got a closer schematic of the board, so we have to use this to interpret which one of these goes with each section. Now I've got that all sorted out. It's a little easier than I thought because the pins are actually labeled the correct numbers on this board compared to our overall drawing. So I've got them all marked out. I've got the video cable running to a flat screen LCD. This is for testing. I've got a frame on it where at one point in time I had it mounted in my paperboy until I could get it fixed. I've got the power supply hooked in. I verified that the wiring goes the right way. And I think we're almost at the point of turning this on. Okay, the moment of truth. So I'm going to reach over and turn on the power strip, and we'll see if anything happens. 3, 2, 1. And we know we've got voltage to the board. I didn't see the monitor turn on. Oh, it's trying to do something. It's out of sync, but it's definitely characters from Carnival. So I will investigate that. Hooray! It's finally time to get the banana plants out for the year, because this is going to be the year that I grow bananas. I can feel it. So I think this is really just random garbage rather than a sync issue. I've checked it out. It doesn't look like what the title screens should look like. So I've got this kit from High Score Saves that adds a high score, and it will help eliminate a lot of the chips on here, which will help with troubleshooting. First step is to remove the processor. I'm going to pop it up like this. Also, you can use a chip puller tool if you want and put it on to pull it up, but I like to wiggle it up a little at a time. It's less likely for me to bend these pins when I do it that way. Then on the processor, there's a little notch, and that is our indication that this is pin 1. So we're going to take this processor, and on the board it says pin 1 here. So I'm going to slide this in to the board. I'm going to look at it from below and make sure that none of the pins are hanging to the outside or in a place to get bent. Like this one's about to get bent. It's going off the side, so we'll bend it back in a little. Just like that. Let's try this again. That looks good. This looks good. Okay, so now the processor's on here. Now, if there's something wrong with this processor, not a big deal. This Z80 CPU, pretty common and pretty cheap. Now we need to take this entire thing. We have pin 1 here, and we have the same little notch here. If we ever forget which one's pin 1 and we don't have to look at the schematics, there's a notch in the holder. So we're going to take this, and this is going to go over the top of all this. So I'm going to bend down these capacitors that might be in the way. And I'm going to get way down here so I can look at this, like so. And we're going to lay it over the board. And this looks good, so I'm going to push it down. There, until it pops into place. And that's in there pretty solid. That's it for the installation. Now I also have this so we can hook it up to a network and do an online version of this where we have high scores compared to everybody around the world. We may play with that later. I just thought I'd buy it. I've not done an online kit before, so we'll give it a shot. Okay, it's all back together again with our high score kit. 3, 2, 1. Well, we got a little flashy light there, so it's doing something. We'll wait for the monitor to kick on. Oh, that's the same garbage we were seeing before. So now I really don't know if it's a monitor problem or a board problem. So more investigation incoming. I've replaced the processor with another chip, and I still have the same problem up here. Now, the ROMs, that whole bank right there, are overridden by this new kit, so we're not worried about those. We do have all these RAM chips through here, and a couple have been replaced over the years. And this is something that would be kind of common with a RAM error. So I'm going to check it out. Over the years, I've accumulated a lot of extra parts, so anytime I need to order something, I order extra. And I have this entire tube of 4027/4116 RAM. This one takes the 4027, so that's what I'm looking for inside this tube. I replaced the first RAM, and this is what I get. So it's different. I don't know if that's better or not. So here's a little test. I have no CPU in. I turn it on, and it looks basically exactly the same without a CPU. Maybe not exactly the same, but similar garbage. So maybe that'll help me in troubleshooting. Now, this may be part of the problem. I'm checking the -5 volt line. So when it's not plugged into the board, it's -5, a little stronger than -5. But I'm going to take it and I'm going to attach it to the harness, or attach the harness to the pins here, and then we'll check it again. Now we have it plugged into the board, same line, but now it says -3.8. And the reason that's important is this RAM requires the -5 volts to operate correctly. So something on the board is drawing that down, or when it's hooked up to the board, that can't keep up with it. So I've got to figure that out. So the -5 volts comes in right here, it runs down, goes across the front, comes down through these long channels. Nothing else going on until it hits right here and comes across to each one of these RAM positions down here. And the continuity is good to all those. So I know it's getting to the RAM. Now we're going to do a little experiment here. I've got the old power supply here and our power junction. And what I've done is I have pulled this purple pin out of this harness. That's the -5 volts. Then I've directly run over with what little wires I had sitting here at the office on another project, the -5 volts to a modern switching power supply. Now, that is going to tell us whether the -5 volts is a problem here or if the -5 volts is a problem here. So let's turn it on. And ta-da! So we're at the high score saves screen. That ends. Here's our game, turned sideways because I got the monitor turned on its side. That means there's nothing wrong with the board. Well, I mean, there could be things wrong with the board, but nothing major wrong with the board. And that our problem is really the -5 volts coming from that power supply. So now we can work on that separately. Now I've booted into the high score saves menu by holding down player 1 start. By holding it down, I had this rigged up so this was hooked to ground, and that's the player 1 start button. So I've released it so it will go ahead and come into the menu. And what I'm going to do is go down to the free play and change that to enabled so I don't have to worry about coins for now in testing. There's our free play. And then we have to hit start again, which was 1, 2. There, got it. Free play enabled. Now I got to get down to the save. Okay, now they're saved, and we should end up with free play. Press start. I don't see anything that says free play, but I'm going to hit the player 1 start, so to speak. Oh, there it is, we're playing. I'd have to move side to side with these inputs. That's not gonna work. At least we know it's playable. Now, one thing I noticed about this as I was troubleshooting is that we have this large capacitor right here. There's supposed to be another one on there, and someone has pulled it off at some point in time. And I thought maybe that would have something to do with it, but looking at the schematics, the other one is involved in the sound amplification. So we still need to replace that, but that was not part of the problem. It's much more likely that the problem is down here with this voltage regulator transistor, because that is the last thing that goes to the -5 volts. And those are kind of common parts to get destroyed. So I'm going to order one of those. I just happen to have a replacement for this voltage regulator as part of an Atari audio regulator rebuild kit. So apparently these were pretty popular. So I'm gonna pop that one off and we'll put this one on and we'll see if that's the source of the problem. Now I have the new voltage regulator in and I'm just testing the harness and we're at -5.02, which is correct. So let's try it in the board. Then when we apply a load to it, we just get garbage and we have very low voltage. So, oh, now it's kicked to something else. Now I have this wonderful power supply cap kit from Arcade Parts and Repair that's got my new capacitor. I'll replace that one and the one that's missing. I've got to take this thing apart a little bit to get to the board, but we'll get it mounted and see if it fixes the problem. Well, we're going to pause this part of the restoration because I just found out now's the time to go pick up the monitor for this cabinet. So I've got to drive up to Indianapolis and it's about an hour-and-a-half drive. I think I'm here.
It's got some scratches on it, but it's freaking.
Yep. All right, we're loaded up, ready to go. The chassis is in that box. The neck we don't want to hit, so I've got plenty of clearance here. It is front weighted this way. So this is how I usually put them in the truck with the monitor glass touching the seat. All right, we made it home safe and sound with our G07 monitor. I've also wiped off the conductive thermal paste off of these and off the back of that, and I'll add some new on before I put it back together. Before we hook it back to the board, I'm going to check the voltages once again. So there's our 5 volt, and I'll check the others and make sure we're still within range. Here's our minus 12 volt line, minus 13, and minus 5 on the minus 5. So we'll see if it can hold up. So now we're at minus 5.02, and there's our game. So adding that big capacitor back fixed our problem, and now we can move on to checking the soundboard. Well, it's come to that time. It's Bondo time. So we need to Bondo in these edges where we've got chips out from the front here. Bondo can seem a little scary, and it is in one way, because once it starts setting up, if you get a big blob on there, then you've got a lot of sanding to do. So your goal is to not mix too much at once, to just put it in while it's still putty-like and soft, get it as close as you can to the shape you want, let it dry, sand a little, add a little more, sand a little, and so on. There's nothing complicated about it. There's just some putty inside of here. We'll put some out on this paper plate. Yes, I know there are nice things that you can use to mix Bondo on, but I'm cheap and I like paper plates. Squirt a little hardener on, doesn't take a whole lot. The more you use, the faster it sets up. And I've got these official Bondo spreaders that are plastic or rubbery. I prefer, though, just to use this putty knife. I've used it over and over and over again. I know exactly how it feels. So I'm going to mix them up and we're going to start adding it. All right, so we have our can of Bondo. We're just going to scoop out some putty. Maybe about that much. We'll put it on the plate. I'll cover the can. Now the cream hardener doesn't take much, just a little bead of it on there like that. And then we're just going to mix it back and forth on this plate. I just kind of turn the plate from side to side, just scrape it along itself. Watch the blue mix in with all the rest. Just like that. Now we don't have a ton of working time here, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start scraping it in like this. We're going to smooth across, we're going to scrape more in. I'm pushing it into the area that we want to fill in. That's going to go all the way across the bottom, just like this. Now right now it's really runny, but it's going to start setting up really quickly. Basically just cleaning my spatula off by scraping it on the edge. And across the bottom here, back across the bottom here. I'm going to pull some up into the cabinet. Just like that. Back across the bottom again. Left. So I'm going to start working this corner. I'm just going to, now it's starting to get a little thicker, a little more putty-like. pretty well set up now to where the point where I can sand it back. But I will point out that you can, along the way if you want, when it's just starting to get hard, take a razor blade and scrape off a sharp line. Or afterwards, you can take a rasp and you can just go back and forth. You can start it that way. Now, what I'm going to do, because it's a delicate kind of edge, I'm just going to sand it back because I don't want to take any chance of just pulling it off with either of those methods. So we'll get it sanded. Well, that's not a bad first attempt. That edge looks really pretty good. This one down here, I have to add a little bit more and fill that in a little bit more. And I had a few places where it chipped off on the side as I was sanding. But in general, it's getting closer. All right, I got another coat in place. We'll let that dry. We'll sand it. Well, here's the result of the Bondo. I've used several layers now. Sanded each one back. You can see how we have a nice edge down there. Have a really nice edge right there. Good edges all around. Got the corners back. And then I've added some to the biggest holes on the top, just to kind of get that started. If we go down, it's not the end of the Bondo or the end of the fill, but I want to get as much done as I can before we prime, and then we'll start looking for low spots again. All right, so now I'm working on the sound part of this, and I've hooked up a potentiometer, which is going to be our volume control. It's not the correct one for this game, but it'll do for testing. And then we have on the power board a connector for our speakers. So I've got to add these Trifurcon pins onto these and make our own connector to plug it in. So I'll do that next. All right, let's turn it on. I'm doing something. And I don't know if there's supposed to be any sound through this anyway, but we heard some sound. So I'm going to hook up the control panel so maybe we can start a game. Ooh, I heard that. We'll start a game here. Well, we have some sounds, we have no music. This is a lovely rainy spring day to continue working on the Carnival. I've got everything working as far as I can tell other than the music board. So I popped the music board off from the soundboard and I've got some diagnostic tools out. We'll explain how we troubleshoot a non-working board. And Opus is going to show us how to catch a wild animal. Now here on our main board, this is the harness that goes to the music board right here. Not much on the main board before we get to this harness. This is a logic chip here that's socketed, And I have already replaced it with another one just to see if that would make any difference. It didn't, so that wasn't the problem. And on this, we have different sets of wires. So the first section way over here to the right are all our voltages and a ground. And then over here to the left, we have some communication wires that go to the board over here. Some are going to the sound, but only 2 are going to the music board. So there's a green and white, and it's blue and white. And according to the drawings and the schematics, I don't know what they do. They have question marks next to them. But in measuring them, I find that one is 5 volts and one has no current on it. Now, the first thing that we'd really want to do is we only have 3 major chips on this board. We have the main CPU, we have another kind of processor, and then we have the ROM that stores the music itself. First thing we'd want to do is pop these up, clean them off with the deoxit, which I've done, and the fiberglass brush, put them back in. That didn't make any difference. Then we need to also test to make sure that all of our pins are connecting. So what you can do is you can take your multimeter and put it on continuity and then just measure from the pins on across the top to their solder joints on the bottom and make sure that all of them are continuous. Well, I've done that on all the chips, so they're continuous. Then a lot of these boards apparently have a problem with this header here that this connects into, that sometimes these connections don't connect to the wires. So what I've done is I've done a continuity check from each of the solder points here and where they go to on the board, all the way over to where they come from over here. And they're all continuous. So it looks like all of our connections are good. Now we can also look up our individual chips and see what voltages need to be getting to these chips. Because if they're not powered up, then they're not going to work. Now on this chip here, which is the music ROM, if I check voltages, I know that this pin should be our 5 volts, and it's pretty close. It's a little low from going through all the rest of the board, but it's close enough. And if we go down a few more, this pin right here is our -5 volts, and it's at -5 volts. And if I go down 2 more pins, that should be 12 volts, and it is. So we've got our voltages there. Same thing for our other chips. We know this should be 5 volts on the main processing chip here. And we know on this chip over here that this should be our voltage in. We can look that up. Same thing, almost 5 volts. So the chips are getting powered correctly, and that means we have more than likely another problem. Now another tool in our arsenal is a logic probe. And a logic probe is pretty simple to use. You hook up a ground to a ground and a 5 volt to 5 volt, which I verified that these extra pins over here provide. And then you take your probe and you place it against individual pins. So if we go down to here, we can hear different tones, mainly highs and lows. Let's see, I don't hear, and you can look up which lines are the data lines. It's kind of like that. Now, if all of these were just dead and nothing was happening, then we would know there's something wrong with the chip. So if we look at this chip here, which has the music memory on it, if we check the address lines coming in, we see something like this. So this is telling the chip what information to get. Now this is kind of interesting. This wire right here is the music coming out. It goes to the soundboard, which then gets mixed in with the other audio. But if I put my probe on that sound out, I get nothing. There's no voltage whatsoever. Now another tool I have that I got to help fix my battle zone is this oscilloscope. And what we can do with the oscilloscope is we can watch values over time. So here I have it hooked up. I've got it hooked to the reset pin, which is pin 4 on this CPU, and a ground over here. And what we're looking for is when a CPU powers up, and it's the same thing for the main board, it's going to start actively trying to do things before the voltage is correct. So what all the circuits are meant to do is reset that once the voltage is correct, and then have it start running the code like normal. So the reset system on this board is actually very unique and a big part of the problem for a lot of people, but it seems to be working for here. So what we want to make sure is that this CPU gets reset. So if we turn on the game and we look over here, we're going to see the CPU is running at 5 volts. Okay. Now, we're just in the track screen, the CPU shouldn't be running. When the game starts, we should see that go down and then back up to reset it. So I'm going to hit the start button. And see, we saw our little flick down, and then we went back up. So that was the reset for that. So the CPU is getting reset like it's supposed to. Since my Encyclopedia Brown investigation did not go so well, I am going to start doing what they call shotgunning, or shotgun approach, which is start replacing things that seem iffy. So I've taken out this chip here, I'm going to put a socket in, and then we'll put a new one in. Now we have sockets for all those, but as I was doing this, I noticed this voltage regulator was a little floppy. It's actually pulled out of the solder down here, so I'm going to redo it as well. Here's what it looks like from the back. So those are the new solder pads for all that. So I've replaced all those parts. No music. If you're looking at that cabinet and thinking it's not level, you are correct. The cabinet's not, but the top's close enough. And that's where I'm going to do my next trick. So what I have is some Type Bond 3, some water, and something to mix it in. Basically, I'm going to mix half Type Bond 3, half water, make kind of a runny paste, and then paint it on top of this. At least that's the tip I was given. That's what we get. That looks a little runny. I might mix some more glue in. You can see that soaks in pretty well and is making a nice little layer on top. So I'm going to continue with the rest. Well, that did not do what I expected. A lot of it just soaked all the way in. I was kind of expecting it to be more of a leveling agent so that I could just pour it on and have it make a smooth layer. Kind of like what you may see more on this part right here. So I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'll see if I put another coat over the top if it does what I am hoping for. That's a little more like what I was expecting. The second coat went on and just made kind of a sheen over the top of it, kind of self-leveling. Right? What do you think?
It looks better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after all that, it's soaked in anyways. We're back to all bumpy. It's hard as heck. So either I will sand it down to the level of where the dips are, or I may do my tried and true trick with some fiberglass resin. We shall see. I'm going to go one more layer over the top of this before I'm going to sand it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same stuff we were using, so the Type Bond, not as much water, but some water. And then I've got some sawdust, some really fine sawdust. I'm going to mix that in to give it a little more bulk so the water can dissipate a little faster, a little more surface area for this to dry up, and surface area to fill in whatever's left as far as the little dips and craters. Now we got something with a little more substance to it, a little more like a paste. Let's put it on. All right, so there's another layer. And if you're looking at this thinking, Todd, you've gone way too far this time, the answer to that is yes, you are absolutely correct. And if you're also saying, that looks really lumpy and terrible, and I'm not sure what you've done, I'm thinking the exact same thing, but I'm gonna let it dry. I'm gonna see if I can do anything with it. Well, that's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but you know, the stuff's on there is on there. It's not like it's just laying on top. It is glued on. So I'm gonna sand it down and see if that was a good idea or a bad idea. Okay, my intuition from the beginning was this glue and water thing was a bad idea. And against my better judgment, when I saw other people say that's what they love to do and that's what they do every time, well, I'm trying to sand it back down. And regardless of the extra layer I put over the top, I can see where I'm sanding that the wood glue doesn't really bond at all to areas that have already been painted. And maybe not even really all that much to the particle board. Just putting a layer on top that's going to flake off eventually. And you put something on that has water in it that soaks in. Now, it has made this wood hard as can be, so that's good. But now I gotta sand all this back off and do something different, because I'm not gonna take a chance of being done and painted and then have this stuff flake back off. Well, it took some effort, but we're not completely smooth, but we're in pretty good shape. So, I will not do that again. I have a replacement chip for that one on the music board, so I'm going to swap them out and we'll give it a try. Well, I have the new chip in, no music, so it wasn't that one. Well, it's not the end of the line. We also have this processor to try in, so I'll swap it and we'll give it a go. It's in. No music. Bummer. I had to buy this entire kit of grommets to make sure I got what I needed for this little hole right here where the power is going to come out. I couldn't find these plastic ones that exactly matched, but I think this is our size right here. So I'll apply that and it will do the same thing those plastic things are doing there. I also bought, as close as I could find, a cover for this box so that when it's in place, you can't just reach your fingers in and get shocked. So I've marked on the inside where this goes, and I'm going to cut a hole for it. I have a brand newly burned sound music chip that I'm going to use, and I'm going to replace the chip on the board with this one, and we'll see if we finally get our music back. All right, let's start a game and see. Fingers crossed. Oh. Oh no, it didn't start again. Let's try again. Start a game. Here we go. We got it. Yes, finally. Hooray. Well, we've come to the end of part 1 of 2, and in part 1 you've seen the journey to pick this cabinet up and to figure out what we needed for it, and to do some basic electrical and electronic work to the point where we can get the game running in a test screen anyway. In part 2, we will do all kinds of things with this cabinet, get it ready for the game, get a monitor, fix it up, and put this in its final form. So I hope you enjoyed part 1, but I hope you enjoy part 2 even more.